The alien general watched through compound eyes as the human child made his hardened soldiers scream and flee in terror. But the invasion of Colony World New Arcadia had started simple. The Krail were here to enslave the human settlers and use this planet as a staging ground to conquer the rest of the Orion Arm. General Zorgax, a hulking mass of chitin plates, serrated claws, and pure malice, had landed his fleet in a remote valley to establish their forward operating base, hidden from the weak and unsuspecting humans. But that damned resourceful 12-year-old Jack Wilson had been out exploring and witnessed the whole thing. If that human child warned the others, the Krell's plan of galactic conquest would be set back decades. Already, the boy was rushing through the dense alien underbrush toward the small, ramshackle collection of prefab shelters that made up the human settlement. General Zorgax could not let the child reach the outpost. Squad 1, hunt down that human whelp, he mandated to his grunts. The future of the Krell hegemony depends on it. The insectoid warriors, all muscle and sharp edges, stormed into the forest, plasma rifles humming with power. The hunt was on. But Jack, with the fate of humanity resting on his small shoulders, had a few tricks up his sleeve. The aliens would soon learn that even a human child was a force to be reckoned with. Sarah's hands trembled as she punched in the emergency code on the comms panel. The screen flashed red, indicating the distress signal was broadcasting on all frequencies to the nearest human military base. Michael put, "There's no telling what those monsters will do if they take the outpost. There's no telling what those monsters will do if they take the outpost." Sarah nodded grimly. "I know. But even on the fastest ship, it'll be weeks before reinforcements get here. We'll have to hold them off ourselves until then." Michael squared his jaw with determination. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll fortify this place into a damned fortress if we have to. But first, we need to get the civilians to the emergency bunker." Sarah turned to the gathered scientists who looked pale and shaken. "All right, everyone. We're initiating evacuation protocol. Grab only what you need and proceed to the transports." As the researchers scrambled to collect equipment and personal effects, Jack piped up, "I want to help." "Let me scout out what the aliens are up to." "Absolutely not," Sarah snapped. "It's too dangerous out there." But Michael knelt down to look his son in the eyes. "Son, you were very brave warning us about the invasion, but this isn't a game. Those creatures won't hesitate to hurt you." Jack set his face with stubborn resolve. "You need to know what they're planning. I can sneak around without them spotting me. I know the land better than anyone." Michael sighed and glanced at Sarah, who threw up her hands in exasperation. "We can't really stop him from going out there. But Jack, promise us you'll be careful. Don't do anything reckless, and come straight back if there's trouble." Jack gave a dutiful nod. "I promise, Mom." With that, Jack scurried off to grab his gear, while his parents watched with a mix of pride and fear gnawing in their guts. Their son was growing up fast on this untamed alien world. Jack crept through the underbrush, keeping the alien base just within eyesight. At the center of their camp, a strange spiky structure was being erected, with wires and tubes running into a glowing core. That had to be the jammer. He belly crawled closer, straining his ears to overhear the Krull soldiers barking orders at each other. "The device will be operational within a cycle," one of them rasped. "Once it's active, the humans will be deaf and blind." "Excellent," another hissed, "and the attack on their pitiful outpost all is in readiness. Curse, Commander. 3 rotations from now, we will wipe the human scum from the face of this world." Jack's blood ran cold. He had to warn his parents. He backed away slowly, praying he wouldn't snap any twigs. Once he was out of earshot, he bolted back to base fast as his legs could carry him. He burst into the command center, startling his parents. "They've got a jammer," he blurted out between panting breaths. "It'll be online soon, and they're going to attack in 3 days." Michael and Sarah traded a horrified look, the pieces clicking into place. "They're making sure we can't call for help. Then they'll wipe us out," Michael said grimly. Sarah gripped the edge of the console. her knuckles white. "But now we know their plan. We've got 3 days to sabotage that jammer and rig up every defense we can." Her eyes were hard as flint as she turned to Jack. "You did good, kid. Real good. Now tell us everything else you saw. We've got a war to win." Michael wiped the sweat from his brow as he hunched over the workbench, soldering wires and circuit boards with intense focus. Around him, the outpost lab buzzed with frantic energy as the other scientists rushed to repurpose every piece of equipment they could get their hands on. "How's that mining laser coming?" he called out to Dr. Chen, who was elbow-deep in the guts of a large industrial machine. "Almost there," she replied, her face streaked with grease. "Just need to bypass the safety protocols and boost the power output." Michael nodded, turning his attention back to the pile of force field generators he was modifying. If they could get these working, it would give them a much-needed edge against the Krell's superior firepower. Across the room, Dr. Patel carefully measured out chemicals into a beaker, his hands shaking slightly. "I think this batch will do the trick," he said, holding up a vial of clear liquid. "Highly explosive, but stable enough to transport." Michael grinned. "Perfect. We'll need all the bang we can get." As the scientists worked, Sarah drilled the civilians on basic combat maneuvers in the courtyard. "Remember, aim for the weak points in their armor," she instructed, pointing to a crude diagram of a Krell soldier. "Eyes, joints, any gaps you can find." The researchers nodded, gripping their makeshift weapons with determined expressions. They might not be soldiers, but they were quick learners. Jack, meanwhile, was out in the dense jungle, rigging traps and barricades along the most likely routes of Krell approach. He'd spent hours studying the terrain maps, identifying natural choke points and ambush sites. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and he whirled around, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. Nothing, just the eerie stillness of the alien forest. Shaking off his unease, Jack finished setting the last tripwire and headed back to base. They were as ready as they'd ever be. The attack came just before dawn, the Krell's war cries shattering the morning mist. Michael jolted awake, adrenaline surging through his veins. "They're here," he shouted, grabbing his weapons and sprinting for the barricades. The outer defenses held for a time. The scientists improvised mines and jury-rigged sentry guns, taking down the first wave of Krell. But the aliens kept coming, their energy shields shrugging off the humans' attacks. Sarah rallied her teams, directing them to fall back to the choke points Jack had prepared. The fighting grew fierce and desperate as the Krell closed in, their plasma rifles sizzling through the air. But the humans gave as good as they got. Michael's modified mining lasers tore through the Krell's armor like tissue paper, while Dr. Patel's chemical bombs sent gouts of flame and shrapnel ripping through their ranks. Still, it wasn't enough. The Krell's superior numbers and technology began to take their toll. One by one, the barricades fell, and the humans were forced to retreat deeper into the compound. Jack ducked and weaved through the chaos, using his small size to his advantage as he darted between the legs of Krell soldiers, planting explosives and luring them into traps. His heart pounded in his ears, the screams of the dying and the roar of weapons fire filling the air. As he rounded a corner, he came face to face with a towering Krell warrior, its mandibles dripping with viscous saliva. Jack froze, his breath catching in his throat. The alien raised its plasma rifle, a cruel gleam in its compound eyes. Jack closed his eyes, bracing for the end. But the shot never came. Instead, a massive explosion rocked the ground beneath his feet, sending him tumbling to the dirt. He looked up to see Michael standing over the smoldering remains of the Krell, a grim smile on his face. "You okay, kiddo?" Jack nodded mutely, his whole body trembling with adrenaline. "Come on," Michael said, hauling him to his feet. "We've got a fight to win." As the battle raged on, the humans clung to a desperate hope that their distress signal had been heard, that somewhere out there, help was on the way. They just had to hold on a little longer. But as the krill pressed their attack, the defenders fell one by one, until only a handful remained backed into a corner of the ruined compound. Sarah, Michael, and Jack stood shoulder to shoulder, weapons raised in defiance as the aliens closed in for the kill. The command center was in chaos, alarms blaring and smoke choking the air. Michael and Sarah huddled over a flickering console, desperately trying to coordinate the outpost's dwindling defenses. Jack burst into the room, his face streaked with grime and sweat. "Mom, Dad, we need to take out that jammer. It's the only way to get reinforcements here in time." Sarah shook her head vehemently. "Absolutely not, you barely made it back last time. I won't risk losing you again." But Michael met his son's determined gaze, a grim understanding passing between them. "He's right, Sarah. It's our only chance. If we can't call for help, we're all dead anyway." Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but the set of Michael's jaw told her it would be futile. She pulled Jack into a fierce hug, her voice cracking. "You come back to us. You hear me? No matter what." Jack nodded against her shoulder, fighting back tears. "I will, Mom. I promise." Michael pressed a small makeshift device into Jack's hand. "Take this EMP grenade. It should be enough to fry the jammer circuits, and remember what I taught you about using your environment to your advantage." Jack pocketed the grenade and gave his father a resolute nod. Then, with one last look at his parents, he slipped out of the command center and into the fray. The Krell camp was in a state of heightened alert, soldiers swarming like angry ants. Jack crept through the shadows, his heart pounding in his ears. The jammer loomed ahead, its spiky frame bristling with ominous energy. Jack was just reaching for the control panel when a massive hand seized him by the scruff of the neck, lifting him off his feet. He found himself face to face with General Zorgax, the alien's mandibles clicking with cruel amusement. "So the little human whelp returns," Zorgax hissed, his fetid breath washing over Jack's face. "I must admit your persistence is impressive. A shame you lack the strength to back it up." The general threw Jack to the ground, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Zorgax loomed over him, flexing his razor-sharp claws. "I will enjoy breaking you, child." Slowly, Jack scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He couldn't hope to match Zorgax in raw strength, but he had other advantages. He feinted left, then dove right, rolling under the general's grasping talons. Zorgax let out a frustrated roar, spinning to face Jack. "Stand and fight, coward." Jack backed away, leading Zorgax toward the crackling power conduit. "What's the matter, General? Too slow to catch one little human." Zorgax charged, his bulk shaking the ground. Jack waited until the last second, then leaped aside, revealing the exposed wiring behind him. Zorgax's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. The general's momentum carried him straight into the conduit, his metal armor conducting the full force of the electrical surge. He screamed, his body convulsing as thousands of volts coursed through him. Jack didn't hesitate. He lunged for the jammer's control panel, slamming the EMP grenade onto its surface. The device pulsed, then released a wave of energy that washed over the jammer, causing it to spark and smoke. Across the battlefield, the human defenders cheered as their comms crackled back to life. Sarah's voice rang out over the open channel. "Mayday, Mayday. This is New Arcadia Research Outpost. We are under attack by hostile alien forces requesting immediate military assistance." But Jack had no time to celebrate. A dozen Krell soldiers closed in around him, their weapons humming with deadly intent. He raised his hands in surrender, hoping he had bought his people enough time. As the aliens dragged him away, Jack caught a final glimpse of Zorgax's smoking body, twitching feebly on the ground. It was a small victory, but he knew the real battle was just beginning. The outpost was in ruins, the last of the defenders huddled behind crumbling barricades. Michael and Sarah stood back to back, firing their weapons at the advancing Krell. The aliens' chitinous armor deflected most of the shots, but a few found their mark, sending the creatures stumbling. "We can't hold them off much longer," Michael panted, slamming a fresh power cell into his rifle. "We need to get to Jack." Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I'll take a team and create a diversion. You lead the rest to the Krell camp and find our son." They quickly gathered the remaining survivors, dividing them into two groups. Sarah took the smaller team, armed with the last of their explosives. They crept through the ruins, planting charges at key structural points. Michael led the larger group towards the Krell camp, their weapons at the ready. They moved swiftly and silently, the urgency of their mission dragging them forward. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the outpost behind them. Sarah's team had detonated the charges, sending debris and smoke billowing into the air. The Krell soldiers turned, their attention drawn by the chaos. "Now's our chance," Michael whispered, signaling his team to advance. They stormed the camp, taking the Krell by surprise. Michael spotted Jack, bound and guarded by two hulking soldiers. He opened fire, dropping the guards with well-aimed shots. "Dad," Jack cried out, relief and fear mingling in his voice. Michael rushed to his son's side, quickly cutting his bonds. "It's okay, kiddo. We're getting you out of here." But as they turned to escape, a terrifying figure emerged from the smoke. General Zorgax, his armor scorched and his eyes blazing with fury, lunged at Michael, knocking him to the ground. The two grappled, trading blows that would have shattered human bones. Michael fought with the strength of a father defending his child, but Zorgax's raw power was overwhelming. Sarah and Jack, seeing Michael in trouble, sprung into action. Sarah fired her rifle at Zorgax, aiming for the weak points in his armor. Jack scooped up a discarded Krell weapon, its weight nearly toppling him over. "Hey, ugly," Jack shouted, drawing Zorgax's attention. "Come and get me." The general turned, his mandibles clicking with rage. He charged at Jack, his claws extended, but Jack was ready. He aimed the Krell weapon, his small hand struggling to keep it steady. He fired the recoil, sending him stumbling back. The blast caught Zorgax in the chest, shattering his armor and burning through his flesh. The general staggered, his eyes widening in shock. Michael seized the opportunity, snatching up a jagged piece of metal and plunging it into Zorgax's throat. The general gurgled, dark blood spurting from the wound. He collapsed, his body twitching as the life drained from him. Around them, the Krell soldiers wavered, their resolve crumbling with their leader's fall. Some turned to flee while others dropped their weapons in surrender. But the humans' relief was short-lived. In the distance, they could see a fresh wave of Krell reinforcements, their weapons glinting in the sun. "We can't fight another battle," Sarah said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Not with our numbers." Michael nodded grimly, gathering Jack and the other survivors close. They braced themselves for the end, determined to face it together. But just as the Krell were about to overrun their position, a deep rumble filled the sky. Human military ships, their hulls gleaming with advanced weaponry, descended from orbit. The ships opened fire, their cannons tearing through the Krell ranks with devastating precision. The aliens scattered, their formation broken, and their courage shattered. The humans cheered, their voices hoarse with relief and triumph. They had done it. Against all odds, they had held out long enough for help to arrive. As the last of the Krell fled, the ships landed, disgorging squads of heavily armed soldiers. They secured the area, tending to the wounded and rounding up the remaining Krell prisoners. A tall, grizzled commander approached Michael and his family, his face etched with respect. "You folks did one hell of a job holding out," he said, shaking Michael's hand. "Your distress signal saved a lot of lives today." Michael smiled tiredly, pulling Sarah and Jack close. "We did what we had to do," he said simply, "for our family and for New Arcadia." In the days that followed, the true scope of their victory became clear. The Krell, their leadership destroyed, and their forces in disarray had abandoned the planet entirely. New Arcadia was safe, its people free to rebuild and thrive. And at the heart of it all were Jack and his family, their bravery and sacrifice, and inspiration to everyone who heard their tale. They were hailed as heroes, their names spoken with reverence and gratitude. But for Jack, the greatest reward was the knowledge that he had made a difference, that when the moment came, he had risen to the challenge and fought for what mattered most. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.